Welcome back. Today we were doing something a little different.
Yeah.
Usually we take a stack of articles, maybe a new book that's hitting the bestseller list.
Right. We chew on it so you don't have to.
Exactly. But today our source material it's raw. It is a transcript.
And not just any transcript. This is a series of really intense, high-level exchanges. It's almost like a sparring match between an AI analyst and a user named Pasan.
Right. And Pasan isn't your average user just asking about the weather or debugging some Python script.
Right.
He is a Sri Lankan cybersecurity expert, which is interesting in itself because he brings this very logical, almost forensic mindset to everything.
He really does.
But his interests, they go way deeper than code. He's deep into the occult, Buddhism, ancient history. And reading through this conversation, it is so clear he has a very specific mission.
Oh, he does. And honestly, it's a mission that forces you to just stop and blink a few times. He is essentially taking a sledgehammer to the established architecture of South Asian history.
It really is a deconstruction. I want to start with a question for you and for everyone listening. It's the question that really kicks off this whole investigation in the source material.
Right.
What if the history books aren't just missing a few pages? What if we are reading the map completely upside down?
That is the core provocation here. And it centers on a concept that I think is going to be our North Star for this entire deep dive. Narrative bias.
Narrative bias. Okay, let's unpack that before we get into the really crazy details. What does Pasan mean by that?
Well, usually when we talk about bias, we think about politics, right? Left versus right, that kind of thing.
Sure.
But Pasan is talking about something much deeper and much older. He's arguing that we filter history through our modern prejudices, through colonial hang-ups, and through linguistic misunderstandings.
So we're not just talking about getting a date wrong or misspelling a king's name.
Not at all. We are talking about how we interpret the sophistication of entire civilizations based on this baked-in assumption that ancient automatically equals primitive.
And today, we are applying that lens, that skepticism of the official narrative, to three massive pillars of history. And I have to say, when I first read the outline for this, I thought, there is no way.
It sounds implausible at first, doesn't it?
Completely. We are looking at three specific mind benders, as Pasan calls them. First, we have an artifact. It looks like a holy altar, something you'd see in a museum with a big do not touch sign. But it turns out to be, well, something much more practical.
Something very, very practical.
Second, we have a forensic audit of the Buddha's biography. And this isn't about enlightenment or philosophy. It's about botany and geography. And it suggests we might be looking at the wrong country entirely.
That one is going to rattle a lot of cages. I mean, the standard map of Buddhism is pretty firmly set in people's minds.
Oh, absolutely. And third, and this is the big one that takes up the entire second half of our deep dive, a radical rereading of the Ramayana.
The epic story of good versus evil.
Right, except in this version, the hero is the villain, and the so-called demon king is actually a misunderstood father.
It is a lot to unpack.
Yeah.
We're going to challenge geography, morality, and even how we define what a demon even is.
Let's just jump right into section 1, the mystery object, because I think this is the perfect primer for how this narrative bias actually works in practice.
So Pasan shares an image with the AI in the chat. And you have to imagine a beautifully carved, ancient stone slab. This is from Anuradhapura, Sri Lanka. We're talking about an artifact that is roughly 2,500 years old.
And just to visualize it for everyone listening, because I've seen the picture in our notes, it is intricate. It's not just a rough block of stone.
No.
It has these rectangular basins carved into it, stylized animal heads, and this prominent circular element at the top. It's carved from this white graphite-type stone. It looks regal. It looks important.
Right. Now, if you walk past this in a museum, or if you were a British archaeologist in the 1800s, seeing this for the first time in the jungle, what is your brain going to tell you it is?
Well, the AI in the transcript did exactly what most of us would do. It guessed it was an altar, or maybe a star chart, or a game board. It just screams sacred mystery. It looks like something you'd sacrifice flowers on, or maybe pour libations for the gods.
Exactly. It looks ritualistic. It looks important in a spiritual sense. And that is where the trap lies. Because Pasan corrects the AI. It's not an altar.
It's a what?
It's a toilet.
A urinal.
A urinal, to be precise, from the Abhayagiri monastic complex.
Okay, hold on. Let's pause on that. A 2,500-year-old urinal that looks like a piece of high art. This isn't just a hole in the ground.
No, and that's the whole point. We were talking about advanced sanitation engineering. It had drainage lines.
Yeah.
That circular sacred element the AI thought was some kind of sun symbol. That was a holder for a water pot for hygiene. It was completely functional. It was designed for thousands of monks living in a massive complex to maintain hygiene standards that, frankly, rivals some modern facilities.
So this brings us right to the core argument Pasan makes about the primitive myth. Why do we, and why did the AI immediately assume it's an altar?
Because of our bias. We operate on this subconscious assumption that ancient plus carved stone must equal mystic ritual. We don't assume plumbing.
Right.
We don't assume that 2,500 years ago, people in Sri Lanka, or Sinhala Deshaya as he calls it, valued hygiene enough to turn it into an art form. We think of the past as dirty and simple and just obsessed with gods because they didn't understand science.
And Pasan makes a really practical point here about the location, too, which I thought was hilarious but also kind of genius.
Right. He says, look at where it is. If this were an altar, a sacred religious object, it would be under a roof. It would be protected inside a shrine. You don't leave your holy relics out in the rain. But because it's a toilet, it just sits there, exposed to the elements. The archaeology department hasn't built a structure over it because, technically it's just bathroom infrastructure.
But the irony is that the craftsmanship is better than most things you'd find in a modern church or temple.
And that is the narrative bias in action. We have been conditioned, largely by colonial histories, to view ancient Sri Lanka as primitive. We assume they were savages who needed civilizing by European powers later on.
But if they had urinals that looked like art pieces and functioned with advanced drainage, that whole primitive myth just falls apart.
It completely collapses. It suggests a society that had moved way past basic survival and was focusing on public health and aesthetics in daily life.
It really sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about. Because if we can look at a piece of advanced sanitation engineering and just hallucinate a mystic ritual because we underestimate the culture, what else are we getting wrong?
That is the question.
When you find a civilization that applies the same level of artistic care to a sanitation facility as they do to a temple altar, you have to throw that primitive label straight out the window.
That's a really good point. You don't carve dragons onto your urinal unless you've already solved the big problems.
You've got it. It implies a society with surplus. Surplus time, surplus skill, surplus resources. They've moved beyond mere survival and into refinement, into art for everyday life.
It shows a different set of priorities.
If this object had been identified as an altar, it would be protected today. It'd be under a roof, roped off.
People would speak in hushed tones around it.
For sure. But because we know it's a toilet, it's just left out in the open. It kind of challenges our sense of what's valuable.
And Pasan argues we are getting the entire geography of Buddhism wrong.
Let's move to section 2, the forensic audit of Buddhist geography. Now, I want to play devil's advocate here a bit because this is a huge claim.
It's massive.
Most people know the standard story. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, was born in Lumbini, which is in modern-day Nepal. He lived in India, attained enlightenment in Bodh Gaya. That's the accepted map. It's on Wikipedia. It's in the textbooks. It's where the tourists go.
It's the standard narrative, absolutely. That's the pilgrimage. It's set in stone. But these sources, they're proposing something. Well, something pretty radical. This Sivuhela historical perspective suggests that some of these key events might have actually taken place in Sri Lanka.
It's a huge claim, and before anyone dismisses it, it's important to see how they build their case. It's not just nationalism. They're trying to use logic, geography, and even botany.
Right. They start with logistics, right at the beginning of the story. Queen Maya, the Buddha's mother.
The traditional story says she was traveling from her husband's kingdom, Kapilavastu, to her parents' home in Devarha to give birth, as was the custom.
And she goes into labor on the way in the Lumbini garden.
Okay, now look at a map of where those places are traditionally located in India and Nepal. The distance isn't trivial. And we need to put ourselves in that time period, 6th century BCE.
No paved roads. No motorcades. You're talking about a bumpy ride in a cart or a palanquin.
For a woman who is 9 months pregnant, the source raises a very practical, almost medical question. Is that journey actually feasible? Is it safe? They argue it's incredibly risky and, frankly, unlikely. They suggest the original text might be describing a geography where these two cities were much, much closer, a geography that might not be in India at all.
And they bring in the plants to back it up. This part was fascinating. The birth happens under a sal tree. They question whether the native range of that specific tree and the fact that it was in full bloom at that specific time of year really matches the climate of the Himalayan foothills.
They're suggesting it aligns better with the ecology of ancient Sri Lanka. It's like using floral evidence in a cold case. The plants don't lie.
But Pasan starts poking holes in it. And I want to be really clear. He's not poking theological holes. He's not questioning the teaching or the philosophy of Buddhism at all.
No, this is all practical.
It's all about logistics, the botany, the geography. He's treating the biography of the Buddha like a cold case file. Pasan asks a very simple question. Is that tree actually native to the Lumbini region in Nepal?
And I assume trees can grow in a lot of different places.
Well, Sharea robusta, the sal tree, is a tropical species. It thrives in hot, humid climates. And while it can grow in the Himalayan foothills, Pasan argues its prevalence and the specific descriptions in the ancient texts, the lushness, the way it flowers, the density of the forest, align much more closely with the tropical flora of Sri Lanka.
So he's saying the botanical backdrop of the story doesn't match the stage we've put it on.
That's the first clue. But then he layers on the logistics of the birth itself. The story goes that Queen Maya was traveling from her husband's kingdom, Kapilavastu, to her parents' home, Devadaha, for the birth.
Which is a custom that still exists, right? Going back to your mother's house.
It is a custom that still exists in many parts of South Asia, including Sri Lanka. But Pasan questions the distance. In the Nepalese mapping, the distance between these two kingdoms combined with the terrain of the Himalayan foothills, he questions the plausibility of a heavily pregnant woman making that specific journey on foot or in a simple cart.
He calls it arduous.
Exactly. And not just arduous, but maybe logically unsound for a royal procession. He suggests the distances in Sri Lanka between the proposed alternative sites for these cities make a lot more sense for a pregnant queen's journey. But here's where it gets really specific. The bowl and the river.
This was the part that made me stop and think, this is the story of the Buddha floating his alms bowl in the river right before his enlightenment.
Right. The narrative flow is specific. He eats a meal, he goes to the river to wash the bowl, and then he floats it as a test. If this bowl floats upstream, I will attain enlightenment. Then he goes and sits under the Bodhi tree.
Okay, seems straightforward.
Except Pasan points out that in the traditional Indian location, the distance between the supposed river, the Niranjana River, and the Bodhi tree is, well, it's not close.
Like, how not close?
It implies a geographical inconsistency. He asks very logically, could a person walk that distance just to wash hands after a meal? If the river is miles away, or if the topography doesn't allow for a quick walk, the story doesn't fit the geography.
Whereas in the Sri Lankan alternative sites,
He suggests the river and the proposed Bodhi tree site are in immediate proximity. The story flows geographically, it just makes more sense on the ground.
speaking of that meal, we have to talk about the food. Kiribath.
Milk rice.
Now, I've had kiribath, it's delicious. But more importantly, anyone who knows Sri Lankan culture knows kiribath is not just food. It is the staple celebratory dish.
It's everything.
New Year, kiribath. Wedding, kiribath. First day of school, kiribath.
It is deeply intrinsic to Sri Lankan identity. And the story says that Sujata offered the Buddha a meal of milk rice right before his enlightenment.
Which Pasan argues is a massive cultural clue.
A huge one. Why would this very specific dish be kiribath if this happened in a region of India where that isn't the primary ceremonial dish? He sees it as a cultural fingerprint of Sri Lanka, embedded right in the core of the text.
But couldn't that just be cultural drift? Like maybe Sri Lankans adopted Buddhism and then retroactively added their favorite food to the story? Like how Renaissance painters painted Jesus eating European bread and olives.
That's a valid counterargument.
Yeah.
And usually that's exactly what historians would say happened.
So how does he counter that?
He counters that by bringing up the scriptures themselves, the Tripitaka, the Pali Canon.
Okay, explain the significance of that for us.
The Tripitaka is the standard collection of scriptures in the Theravada Buddhist tradition. It contains the suttas, the rules, everything. And it is a historical fact, accepted by all scholars, that these oral traditions were first committed to writing at Luvihara in Sri Lanka.
So the first time the Buddha's words were actually written down, ink on palm leaf, it was in Sri Lanka.
Correct. In the Pali or Sinhala script, not in India. Pasan's argument connects the dots. If the texts were first written here, and the specific food described is from here, and the flora matches here, maybe the events actually happened here.
So he's arguing that the retroactive theory is actually the bias. We assume it must be India because India is bigger or because of later traditions, but the primary evidence, the actual writing, is Sri Lankan.
Exactly. And he even brings up geometry. This blew my mind. The four main pilgrimage sites, birth, enlightenment, first sermon, and death.
Right.
Pasan claims that if you map the traditional Indian sites, Lumbini, Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, Kushinagar, The geometry is messy. It's a jagged, irregular.
Okay.
But he proposes an alternative set of sites in Sri Lanka, Isan Basagala, Himewurundakuhawa, Bomurugala, and Budangala.
And these form a shape.
He claims they form a specific geometric shape. He argues that ancient sacred sites were often laid out with sacred geometry in mind, that this precision isn't an accident. He also mentions a lost city of Chithanagara, linking it to one of the sites.
It's a full-on forensic audit. He's treating the biography like a crime scene investigation where the witnesses are trees and rivers and geometry.
And there's one last piece of physical evidence. The sword.
Prince Siddhartha's sword. The symbol of him cutting off his hair and renouncing his royal life. A huge moment.
A pivotal moment.
Yeah.
Pasan asks very simply, where's the sword in India?
And the answer is?
It's not a prominent relic in the Indian pilgrimage circuit. There isn't a famous temple that holds the sword of Siddhartha. But Pasan claims it is enshrined at Kiri Vihara in Pathiraarachichi, Sri Lanka. For him, the physical presence of the relic trumps the accepted map.
So to recap this section, we have a geography that doesn't fit the botany, a river that's too far from the tree, a meal that belongs to a different culture, and the actual texts themselves being written in Sri Lanka. It's a compelling case for narrative bias, shifting the entire location of history.
It's a huge case, and if you think questioning the location of the Buddha is controversial, wait until we get to the Ramayana.
Yeah.
Because Section 3 is where the gloves really come off.
Section 3, the Ramayana inversion. Now, for those who don't know, the Ramayana is one of the great epics of the world. It's the story of Rama, an avatar of the god Vishnu, rescuing his wife Sita from the demon king Ravana.
Right. It's the ultimate good versus evil story.
That is the version we all know.
Because the standard Ramayana paints him as the ultimate evil. 10 heads, pure ego, the kidnapper. Full stop.
But these sources, they basically build a completely different resume for him. First and foremost, he's a scholar, a genius, learned in the Vedas, an expert in science and medicine, a master musician, and a deeply devout follower of Lord Shiva.
The source brings up the story of the Atmalinga. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. In the lore, Ravana performs such intense austerities and shows such incredible devotion that Lord Shiva is profoundly impressed. So impressed that he entrusts Ravana with the Atmalinga. It's essentially the soul of the universe in a physical form, the ultimate sacred object. And the theological point the source makes is a powerful one. Would Shiva, the destroyer and one of the supreme gods, give the literal soul of the universe to a being of pure, irredeemable evil?
It suggests Ravana had a spiritual depth that the villain caricature just erases.
Absolutely. And it's not just in the Hindu tradition. There's a major Buddhist text, the Lankavatara Sutra. In this sutra, the Buddha doesn't come to Lanka to fight Ravana. He comes to teach him.
So Ravana isn't an enemy. He's a student.
He's a philosophical dialogue partner. He asks the Buddha deep questions about the nature of reality and the mind. He's portrayed as a seeker of truth, a philosopher king.
So you have a philosopher king, a Shiva devotee, a scholar, ruling this advanced society, but then the war happens, and this is where the sources they take the gloves off. They don't just defend Ravana, they actively prosecute Rama.
They do. But Pasan challenges the AI to do something very difficult. He challenges it to use Valmiki's Ramayana, the original Sanskrit text, not the cartoons, not the TV shows, not the abridged versions, to prove that Ravana is a villain and Rama is a hero.
And the AI, it struggles.
It does more than struggle. This was a fascinating part of the transcript. The AI admitted that when it tried to list facts from the text that criticized Rama, its own system flagged the response.
Its own programming flagged it as a violation.
That is terrifying, and Pasan calls it out immediately. He says, truth is considered a violation.
It's a perfect example of how bias is coded into us and now into our machines. We are trained to believe Rama is the Marata Purushottam, the supreme man of honor. And anything that contradicts that, even if it's right there in the source text, gets flagged as wrong or harmful or biased.
So they had to bypass the bias. They stripped away the hero label and just looked at the actions, the rap sheet. And what they found is a stunning indictment of Rama. Let's break down the crimes.
First, the killing of Vali. Vali was the monkey king. Rama needs to kill him to help his ally, Sugriva.
But he doesn't challenge him to a fair duel, right? Heroes are supposed to duel. They look you in the eye.
No. Rama hides behind a tree. While Vali is already in the middle of a fight with Sugriva, Rama shoots Vali from the bushes. He snipes him in the back.
Pasan labels this adharma unrighteous. And honestly, it's hard to argue with that. If you're the paragon of virtue, you don't shoot people in the back while they're distracted.
Then there is the killing of Shambhuka, This one it's rough for modern listeners, but it
Yeah.
is in the text.
What happens here?
Shambuka was a Shudra, a lower caste individual. He was an ascetic, performing deep penance and meditation. But according to the strict caste laws of that time, that kind of spiritual practice was forbidden for his caste.
It was reserved for Brahmins and royals.
Right. And the belief was that his penance was causing a disturbance in the cosmic order, which led to the death of a Brahmin's son.
So what does Rama do? Does he talk to him? Tell him to stop.
Rama finds him meditating and beheads him.
He kills a guy for praying. The hero kills a man for meditating because he's the wrong social class.
It's right there in the Uttarakhanda, the final book of the Ramayana. Pasan argues this just destroys the idea of Rama's universal benevolence. He was an enforcer of a rigid, oppressive social hierarchy.
And then we have the treatment of women. This is where Pasan really leans in. It starts with Surpanaka, who is Ravana's sister.
This is the incident that actually starts the whole war. Surpanaka approaches Rama and Lakshmana in the forest. She's attracted to them. She proposes to them.
Okay, so how do the gentlemen respond?
They mock her. They toy with her. And when she gets angry or persistent, Rama's brother, Lakshmana, mutilates her. He cuts off her nose and her ears.
This act of extreme violence against a woman is what triggers Ravana's actions.
Exactly. Ravana isn't starting a war for no reason. He's retaliating for the brutal mutilation of his sister. But then let's look at Sita, Rama's own wife. He fights this massive war to rescue her from Ravana. He burns down Lanka. He wins.
The hero's victory.
You'd think.
Yep.
And then when he sees her,
He doesn't hug her. He doesn't say, I missed you.
no, he refuses to accept her. He publicly questions her chastity and demands a virginity test, the Agni Pariksha. She has to walk through a massive fire to prove she wasn't touched by Ravana.
Which is just unbelievably humiliating. It implies he doesn't trust her at all.
And even after she passes, even after the fire god Agni himself vouches for her, he later abandons her. She's pregnant with his twin sons, and he exiles her to the forest because the public is gossiping about her time in Lanka.
So he chose public opinion over his pregnant wife.
Pasan asks a haunting question. What king drives his queen away?
So that's the prosecution of Rama. He's a caste enforcer, a wife abandoner, and a sniper. But Pasan also mounts a defense of Ravana, the so-called demon king.
The defense rests on 3 pillars. First, restraint. Ravana had the power, the astras, the celestial weapons, to destroy Rama's armies in a single blow. But he didn't. Pasan argues he showed military restraint to avoid the mass slaughter of common soldiers.
Second is the abduction itself. Pasan points out a really weird detail in the text. Sita describes the scenery from the Pushpaka Vimana, the flying chariot, in great detail. She talks about how beautiful the rivers and mountains look from above.
Pasan's argument is simple human psychology. Someone being dragged away against their will, terrified for their life, doesn't stop to enjoy the scenic view.
That's a good point. It implies she wasn't as terrified as the standard story makes her out to be.
And the third pillar, the Sanjivani plant.
Right. This is the magical healing herb.
We know the story where Hanuman brings the whole mountain with the herb to save Lakshmana, but Pasan cites a local Sri Lankan legend that says it was actually Ravana who secretly used his medical knowledge to help them.
Wait, Ravana saved his enemies.
Ravana was a devotee of Shiva and a master of Ayurveda. The legend says he secretly treated Rama and Lakshmana when they were wounded or killed in battle.
Why on earth would he do that? Why save the men who are trying to kill you?
Because he didn't want his daughter to be a widow.
Whoa, stop. His daughter.
And this is section 4. This is the twist that changes the entire genre of the story.
Okay, lay this out for me. Because in the mainstream version, Ravana abducts Sita because he lusts after her, or for revenge for his sister. But Pasan introduces a specific Sri Lankan folk tradition. Sita was not a stranger. She was Ravana's own daughter.
Born to Mandodari, Ravana's queen.
How does that even work? If she's his daughter, why was she found in India, in a furrow of the earth, by King Chanaka? That's the classic origin story for Sita.
The backstory is tragic. When Sita was born to Mandodari, there was a prophecy, a dire prophecy. It stated that this child would be the cause of the downfall of Lanka.
Okay, standard myth stuff. This child will destroy you. So usually the villain kills the child, right?
And apparently there was a custom at the time where firstborn daughters were sometimes killed to protect the patrilineal lineage, especially if the omens were bad. But Pasan argues Ravana refused. He couldn't do it. He was a father.
So he saved her.
He saved her by sending her away. He put her in a vessel, a casket, and set her adrift on the ocean. That is how she floated to India and was eventually found by King Janaka. He exiled her to keep her alive.
So fast forward. Rama mutilates Ravana's sister. Ravana hears about it. He realizes his long-lost daughter is married to this man.
Exactly. Pasan argues Ravana didn't go to India to abduct a woman he lusted after. He went to rescue his daughter. He sees that this family, Rama and Lakshmana, are violent towards women. He goes to get his child out of what he sees as a dangerous, abusive situation.
That recontextualizes the entire war. It's not a war of lust. It's a custody battle.
Completely. And remember Vibhishana, Ravana's brother who defected to Rama's side.
The famous trait of...
Vibhishana kept telling Ravana, return Sita. In the standard version, we think he's being moral. Brother stealing another man's wife is wrong.
But in this version...
In this version, Vibhishana wasn't talking about morality. He was talking about the prophecy. He was saying, she's going to destroy us, send her back, get her out of Lanka.
But Ravana refused.
He refused. Not out of ego, but because he was a father. He refused to give his daughter back to a man he viewed as an abuser. He chose to burn for her. He chose to let his kingdom fall, rather than send his daughter back to a man who would force her to walk through fire to prove her worth.
It turns Ravana into this incredibly tragic figure, a father fighting the world and destiny itself to protect his child.
And it explains the biggest plot hole in the standard version, why he never touched her. In the standard story, Ravana keeps her in a garden and never forces himself on her. The explanation is usually he was under a curse, or he was hoping she'd eventually love him.
But Pasan's explanation is much simpler.
Much simpler. You don't sleep with your daughter, you protect her.
That is heavy. It completely flips the moral polarity of the entire epic, but it also aligns with what Pasan says about the demons themselves. Section 5, decolonizing the demons.
Yeah, this is key. We hear these words, Yaksha, Raksha, Naga, Deva. In the Ramayana, these are translated as demons, monsters, snakes, and gods. We picture fangs, claws, scales.
But Pasan says, no, that's a complete misinterpretation. These weren't mythical creatures. These were the Sivuhela, the 4 professional tribes of ancient Sri Lanka.
Exactly. It's a sociological reality that got mythologized by outsiders who didn't understand it. Take the Yaksha. In the myth, they are flesh-eating demons. But the root word is related to working or forging. They were the specialists in metallurgy and mining, iron workers.
So they were the industrial base of the civilization.
Right. And the Raksha Ravana's tribe, the word means protectors or guardians. They were the specialists in irrigation and agriculture.
Okay.
The Naga, the snakes, were simply traders and transport specialists who lived near water and the coast. And the Deva were the educators, the Ayurvedic doctors, the spiritual guides.
So when the epic says Rama is slaying demons, he's essentially killing ancient union workers and farmers.
In a way, yes. He's destroying a highly organized civilization structured around professional guilds. And Pasan notes that modern Sri Lankans still use phrases like Apiyaku, we are Yakshas, with pride.
They aren't saying we are demons.
No, they are saying we are the industrious iron-forging ancestors. It's a statement of cultural pride, not horror. The demon label is just war propaganda from the winning side. It's no different than how any empire dehumanizes the people they conquer to justify their actions.
Which brings us to the final mindbender. This is Section 6, Valmiki's Secret Code.
This is a meta-theory about the author of the Ramayana, Valmiki.
Now, this is the part I struggled with at first.
Yeah.
If Rama was so bad and Ravana was so misunderstood, why did Valmiki write the story the way he did? Why call Rama a hero? Why not just write the truth?
Tafan suggests that Valmiki did write the truth, but he had to hide it in plain sight.
How so?
The theory is Valmiki knew Rama was a hypocrite, but he couldn't just say that.
Why not?
Because Rama was a king, and eventually he was being deified as an avatar of Vishnu. You don't criticize a god king openly if you want to keep your head attached to your shoulders. It would have been blasphemy. The text would have been destroyed.
So what did he do?
He wrote the story as a divine epic to protect it. He knew that if he labeled it holy, nobody would dare edit it. It would survive the ages intact. It would be preserved.
And he left the clues inside for future generations.
Exactly. He left the evil acts of Rama right there in the text. The killing of Ali, the execution of Shambhuka, the horrific treatment of Sita. He didn't scrub them clean. He left them there like time bombs for intelligent readers to find later on.
He trusted that eventually someone would read the text and say, wait a minute, this guy isn't a hero.
Right. And Pasan points to a specific meeting in the text, the Atri and Asuya bait, he calls it.
Explain that.
Okay, so Rama meets the sage Atri. Atri is the father of Dattatreya. Now, Dattatreya is considered a supreme avatar in many traditions, a pure manifestation of the divine trinity. Pasan suggests Valmiki subtly juxtaposes Rama against the lineage of Dattatreya to show that Rama is a false avatar, a copy, a pale imitation of true divinity.
And meanwhile, Ravana is elevated in the background.
Pasan points out Ravana's true status in the text and in other texts. He isn't just a brute. He's an author. He wrote the Shiv Tandav Stotram, a hymn to Shiva, which is still used today.
I've heard that. It's incredibly complex poetry.
Exactly. You don't get that from a monster, you get that from a scholar. And he holds the title Lankashvara, Lord of Lanka. The suffix Ishvara is usually reserved for high deities like Shanishvara.
Yeah.
It implies a divine status.
And he appears in Buddhist texts, too.
Yes, this is a huge point. In the Lankavatara Sutra, a major Mahayana Buddhist text, Ravana isn't a villain. He is the one who invites the Buddha to Lanka to give teachings. He receives teachings directly from a previous Buddha, Kassapa. This proves his spiritual elevation.
So we have a demon who writes famous hymns, holds divine titles, and learns directly from the Buddha, fighting a hero who shoots people in the back, executes meditators, and mutilates women.
It forces you to ask,
Yeah.
who wrote the history books and why? It's the ultimate example of history being written by the victors.
Which leads us to the outro, the final provocation, the end of Rama's life.
This is the saddest part of the story, really. In the traditional narrative, Rama walks into the Sarayu River at the end of his life. It's painted as a divine ascension. He dissolves and returns to the spirit realm.
A noble end for a hero.
But look at the facts on the ground. He lost his wife. Sita chose to return to the earth rather than go back to him. He lost his honor. He executed a lower caste man for praying. He shot a king in the back. His kingdom is in a weird state. He abandoned his own children.
It's a life filled with moral compromises and losses.
So interprets him walking into the river, not as a divine ascension, but as a suicide.
A suicide caused by the crushing realization that he had lost everything, his wife, his honor, his peace.
It's a tragic reading of a character who collapsed under the weight of his own contradictions. He tried to uphold rigid rules over basic humanity, and in the end, it destroyed him.
We started this deep dive with a toilet that was mistaken for a holy altar. We ended with a demon king revealed as a protective father.
And that is the power of questioning the narrative. As Pasan put it in the transcript, truth traces are everywhere if you have an unbiased eye.
We have to look for the erased marks in history, the things that don't quite fit the official story, the toilet where the altar should be, the river that's too far away, the father where the monster is supposed to be.
Because usually that's where the real human story is hiding.
That's it for this week's deep dive. Keep your eyes open and don't take the map for granted. It might just be upside down. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
You call a demon, yet here I stand, unbroken, truth burning in my hand. With flick of a nail I could have crushed your orb, but tell me who have I harmed before? Was it over when you struck from behind? Bodies met the mark of a coward's mind. A father slain, defending his kin. Where's the justice in the blood you spilled? The earth fell fighting for love's last breath. You watched shatter, you crumble to death. 7 lives taken, your name called the lies. Yet you can't be feeling, look in my eyes. Shaka, my sister, my blood. Her face disfigured, her body in mud. For what crime? For her love, her plea. You maimed a woman, you call that bravery. And Sita has stolen, you call her your own. Yet cast her aside when her loyalty's shown. Tell me, lover, what love breaks this way? What she charges this queen away? Queen away. What she charges this queen away? Tell me now, who am I? A demon or a king who walks with the sky? As clear your armies that shall restrain, while your virtue as a mass to take. Speak out if you dare, what justice lives in the lives you tear. That end the monarch's wings. I command armies and celestial kings. Blessed by Shiva, I stand tall. While your ballroom begins to fall, you think I feel your ragtag horde. I know of your plans, your truth ignored. Bobby's back pierced by your lies. A noble king fell under coward skies. Just how you fought, defending her fight. You left him dying in the shadow of night. Shamabuka, who prayed, was slain by your sword. Where justice flows from such a lord. On every blood stain, the ground you claim. Commander's cries, your victories are a shame. Ramachandra, do you know of light sacred love? Shiva's gift, only I know. Remember that time you died. I hold the key to life and death, the gift of God to conquer death. No weapon you wield, no bow you raise can stand against what Shiva pulled